Which historical figure is mistakenly idolized? All sorts of women, who literally invented the kill the buffalo to genocide the Indian strategy, and who asked that Nathan Bedford Forrest could join the US Army to help him kill Indians alongside him. Get a new anti-racist hero, Edgewords. Mahatma Gandhi, he was openly and extremely racist. Thought black Africans were the lowest class. He was a pedophile, and insisted on having young girls sleep naked with him to test his celibacy. He was a hypocrite. When his wife was dying of pneumonia, he refused treatment from Western doctors, and she died. When he had malaria and appendicitis, both times he was treated by modern medicine. He was an objectively terrible human, who happened to also accomplish something noteworthy. Christopher Columbus. It's a national holiday in the U.S. He was known for killing thousands of natives and raping thousands of young girls and women. All their families were slaughtered in front of them, along with his sexual interactions with manatees that he wrote down, and for having syphilis, which back then was only contracted from sodomizing goats or llamas. Marie Antoinette. She was a spoiled brat, who spent the equivalent of millions of dollars on clothes while her people starved from taxes on salt. Taxes she spent on aforementioned clothes, and she was not a fashion plate either. She was known for two styles, grey hair, and a brown, called cacodophin, which was supposedly the colour of her baby son's poop. Matthew Shepard. He should not be held up as an example of LGBTQ sainthood. That people disagree so viciously with me, and a lot of other people about this, speaks volumes about how uninformed they are. He was a meth dealer who was murdered by a former boyfriend in a drug deal gone sideways. Julius Caesar committed genocide against native tribes in Western Europe, and then tried to pull a coup against Rome when he was called to answer for his brigandage. There's a claim to be made that he was the template for populist dictatorships we recognize in modern times. Nikola Tesla. Sure, he was a fine inventor, but many of his inventions were based on bogus science, not possible, and at the end of the day he was nothing more than an employee. Most of his mythos comes from an old The Oatmeal comic strip which was just so wrong. Pablo Picasso, an icon of modern art, is revered for his groundbreaking work. Nonetheless, his personal life, particularly his relationships with women, was marked by troubling patterns of behavior, prompting a reevaluation of his off-canvas actions. If you ask enough people, you'll find that at least someone who thinks someone else has been misrepresented. But yeah, Reagan was a dickbag, and modern US conservatives are either ignorant or flat out dumb for thinking he was a good president. I've been studying US counties lately, and so many of them unnamed after unrepentant are holes, racists, murderers, scumbags in general. Andrew Jackson, Kit Carson, Joseph Lane, George Armstrong Custer, Francis Marion, and on and on and on. Genghis Khan, perhaps not idolized, but praised. He was undoubtedly a great military leader. However, he was much better as a social organizer, and as someone to whom many talented military leaders, including some more talented than him. World War II is often glorified, but his policies contributed to the 1943 Bengal famine, and his imperialist views raised serious ethical questions, complicating his status as a straightforward hero. The Roman Republic into an empire is often romanticized, but his ascent to power was marked by dictatorial rule and the suppression of democratic institutions, aspects that are frequently glossed over. Hernando de Soto. Dude was absolutely cruel towards the Native Americans, and yet he has buildings and parks and all sorts of places named after him here in Florida. Although, we have DeSantis as a shitty governor, so I'm not surprised. Most US presidents, really. As a Chomsky quote about how none of the post-war presidents would escape punishment at The Hague if the Nuremberg principles were actually applied to them. I think about that a lot. Henry Ford. Bro was an actual Nazi and didn't even hide it. tried to police his employees' social lives, and actively called for violence against anyone trying to unionize. He also treated his son Edsel like dog shit. Admired for her dedication to the poor, Mother Teresa's approach to suffering and her mission's conditions have sparked controversy, challenging the uncritical sainthood narrative surrounding her work. John Lennon. He was a serial cheater, woman beater, and a self-entitled prick living so far up his own ass that he never realized he was the embodiment of what he often protested against. Thomas Jefferson. I got severely downvoted on a Reddit comment a while back for calling him a pedophile rapist bastard. Like it isn't really fucking simple to Google Sally Hemings. Martin Luther King Jr. He was an adulterer, and he plagiarized papers he wrote in school and even sermons he gave. King was a member of the Freemasons and was probably killed by them. A certain religious figure who slept with a child, raped women, endorsed acts of genocide, and enslaves. I'm not allowed to say who, as he is idolized by so many people. Fucking all then. The world is absolutely chock full of flawed people doing amazing things. You can appreciate their greatness without putting them on a pedestal. There are no historical figures that should be idolized, either because they were flawed, or because they weren't and therefore wouldn't want to be idolized. I hear there are apparently some people out there who don't think that Ronald Reagan was a piece of shit who should have died way sooner than he did. Christopher Columbus. He didn't do any of the things he's credited with beyond killing loads of innocent people in search of gold that didn't exist. Christopher Columbus. Also, I don't know why Americans have Columbus Day as a national holiday when he didn't even set foot on North America. Napoleon, still idolized by a lot of right-wing French people. Before Hitler, Napoleon was the go-to example for the worst tyrant in Europe. Sir Francis Drake, who stopped people who were fleeing Spain from claiming asylum in England by attacking their boats in the English Channel. Douglas MacArthur. Not a bad person and not a bad general, but his reputation far outweighs his actual performance as a military commander. Mao in China. He is worshipped almost as a deity, and yet causes more deaths due to negligence or orders than any other head of state. I don't know if he qualifies as historical yet, but Steve Jobs was an enormous asshole. Posted from my iPhone. So there's that. I see a lot of people on the internet. If idolized is the correct word, but sympathizing with Mr. Hitler. It's so wrong, but Alexander Hamilton. Aaron shot him. Yes. But Bo was everything Alexander Hamilton is supposed to have been. COL and no. He wasn't a general in the US Army. Robert E. Lee. He was a traitor and a piss-poor strategic leader. Barack Obama. He was a dud as president and continued the failed neoliberal policies of his predecessors. Franklin Roosevelt was a cheater and a warmongering fascist. Huge racist with dictatorial aspirations. John Lennon liked to beat women and neglect his children while he went on drug benders. A real pass. Genghis Khan responsible for some of the worst atrocities and human suffering in all of history. A lot of these people can be summed up with the phrase he was a great man, but not a good man. Isn't Hitler idolized in India for some reason? I seem to remember reading that. Once upon a time, Stalin and Mao, their dictatorships killed upwards of 70 million people between them. Alexander the Great was basically an invader and conqueror of peoples and cultures. Al Warren locked up an entire ethnic group, yet people still laud him as a hero. All of them. They're all flawed humans with negative sides that are downplayed. The whole British monarchy bunch of pedophiles and colonizers. Che Guevara was racist, homophobic, and killed hundreds of people. Jeffrey Dahmer, possibly thanks to the documentary on Netflix. Perhaps all of them. Idolizing folk is almost never wise. Winston Churchill. He was basically the British Hitler. Watson Crick. Rosalind Franklin. Custer certainly seems like he was quite the asshole.